Hello and welcome to the Cougar Proud Podcast. This is Greg Woods, WCC beat writer for the Spokesman Review, joined as always by Jamey of CougFan.com. And I don't know about you, but I think it is insane that we are at the final week of the regular season. I was just telling the Cougars this idea the other day when I was leaving the media room, like, man, because the first week it was like, hey, do we want to do midweek availabilities with David Riley? I was like, well, we're still in the middle of football season, so that's a lot of work. But now we're just about done with basketball, so it's crazy. But here we are. We're gonna get to mostly just basketball today. They're coming off of a loss, or last week, I guess they beat Pacific pretty handily and then lost to St. Mary's, both of which kind of went the way we expected them to go in terms of the results. So that puts the Cougs at number 6 we're doing this on Monday afternoon. So number 6 as of Monday. And a lot of what they'll be in the hunt for this coming week, they have LMU and Pepperdine both on the road, and they're going to want to be gunning for the number 4 spot, which comes with a significant bye in the conference tournament, which starts on March the 5th in Las Vegas. So that'll be most of what we get to today. So why don't we just kind of jump into the most recent game, which was their loss to St. Mary's over the weekend. That was a 83-67 decision. I don't think either of us are surprised that they lost. Maybe the way that happened is worth discussing. What did you kind of take away most from their game against St. Mary's?
Yeah, I think when you kind of look at it, the first thing you focus on is for 27 minutes, they were right there, right? It was a 1-point game with 13 minutes to go. And then it wasn't. And I think that's kind of been, what has held them back. I mean, amongst other things over the last couple of years is on a dime, things can flip. The script can flip. And what they've done a good job, and we talked about this a little bit, wrote about it or talked to David Riley about it, is, Pacific made that push and brought it back to whatever it was, 2-3 points.
Yeah.
And then they went on a run and put them away. And we've seen them do that a few times at home. Pepperdine did it. Or they did it to Pepperdine. They did it to Seattle U. Portland never really did it. But even going all the way back to now I'm drawing a blank. What other day there was? LMU. They were down big early and they fought back and so on.
Yeah.
It's been the thing that they've been able to do at home, but not on the road, right? You look at Oregon State. You look at San Francisco. And a number of other games as well. And I think what David Riley said is true. They kind of took St. Mary's first punch, right? St. Mary's was throwing some jabs, and they took it from, to a 6-point lead. Wazoo was up 7. St. Mary's fought back. But then I think St. Mary's came in with another haymaker, and Wazoo had no response. And I think that's a testament to some of it just is Randy Bennett. I mean, right? He's been there almost 30 years. He's an excellent coach. One of the better. I think I held this for a while. I think he's one of the better coaches in the country, and I think it's remarkable that he has stayed at St. Mary's all this time. I'm sure he's had other offers, but I think when you start to look at those last 13 minutes, it's St. Mary's got everything they wanted on the offensive end, and Wazoo was completely lost on the offensive end. And St. Mary said, we're going to take away your 3-point shot and dare you to drive inside on McKeever and Wessels, and Moralskis is a big guy as well. And Wazoo simply could not do it. They didn't know what to do without the 3-ball. And I think Mark Few said this after the Gonzaga game, that when Wazoo is rolling, they are money from deep. And we saw that in the first half, right? They had 7 threes.
7 for 12.
Yeah. We saw that in several of the games where they have won. In the game against Gonzaga, right? They're in it for a while because they're hitting every possible 3. But when the 3 goes, they're not a team that can really adjust to attacking the rim and rely purely on finishing inside. We have really not seen them win a lot of games where they aren't hitting 3s. And I think St. Mary's just ended up, noticing that, taking advantage of that, and it just created a terrible matchup where, again, you've got a couple trees inside, but you don't have enough interior scoring to battle off McKeever and Wessels and Moralskis.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's watched any significant amount of these games this season will notice that their first action is almost always a little bit of like an elevator screenplay where you have two bigs kind of screening for, or not necessarily two players in general, screening for another guy that's kind of springing open on the wing, and then they'll hit him for a catch and shoot three. And in the first half of this game, like that was working like super well. I mean, like I said, 7 for 12 from three. A lot of those looks are just pure catch and shoot, which is where you want to get the ball to Reed Favors and Emily Aho and guys like that. So you see kind of like the vision for the offense, at least on the first action. But as the game unfolds, you start to see the veteran coaching savvy of a guy like Randy Minnick kind of take hold and, go into action. I mean, so 7 for 12 in the first half on threes, and second half 0 for 7. And I almost feel like it's one thing to miss every three you take, but the reduction in attempts, I think, is much more telling.
That's I wrote that in my post game. Like, hitting 0 threes is not good, but only taking 7, and several of those were the game's over. You come down, you just start chucking. But I think the fact that they couldn't even get the looks they wanted, and just to kind of drive from the point of that, in some ways, live or die by the three is an extreme. And I think there have been examples in the past of teams that, Kyle Smith's second to last team. Oh, actually, this actually ends up being a good shot. Wazoo, 49%, according to KenPom, 49% of their points come from three. 37% of their points come from three. That's 49th most in the country. Kyle's second to last team, 9th most of their points came from three, 40%. But you start looking at the numbers, and if they shoot under 30% from three, they don't win. And they literally do not have a win this season when they shoot under 30%. The only win they have where they shoot 30, you look at their losses. I'll try and make this point a little clearer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of their losses coincide with their lowest three-point percentages. They've won one game within that, and that was the Eastern game, which obviously they made up for by the fact that they, shot a really good percentage from two. And then they have lost. I mean, they have lost games where they've shot well from three. Ironically, their two best games percentage-wise from three were both losses, ASU and Santa Clara. But there's a pretty strong correlation between, if they're going to win, they've got to probably hit at least 10 threes. And they only have 5 wins this year when they don't, and they're still hitting 8 or 9. But you start looking, 7 threes against St. Mary's, they can't win that way. That is where they get so much of their volume is from the 3-point line.
Well, and I think that's also what is supposed to be like at least the way it seems to me is that what Riley sees as his vision for the team is that they're also great around the basket too. Like, he wants the threes to have good volume, obviously, but he's always prided himself as a coach on also being efficient on 2-pointers and around the basket, which is not like, they've been great at shooting the three in some cases, but the other side just has not been there. The other shoe has just not dropped. So I think that's like the next. I know we keep talking about the next evolution, but I think like when year 3 comes around, like I think what we'll be looking for is like, can they win games, not only when they're not making threes or getting the looks from three, but also like, can they just, score at the basket on a consistent basis, which, and I don't even think that like a game against St. Mary's is like a great like way to measure that. I mean, they have 2 ginormous guys between Wessels and McKeever, both of whom are 7-1 or 7-3. And by the way, I was hanging out in the media room before during halftime for a little bit, and the team came kind of jogging by on their way back out onto the court, which gave me a chance to actually like be a few feet away from those guys. And I was like, I mean, you see 7-1, 7-3, and you're like, okay, that's pretty huge. But when you're up close, you're like, golly. Yeah. I mean, it is just another.
They're the 12th biggest team in the country, according to KenPom.
12th biggest,
right?
Who? That's for having 2 7-footers and only 12. Like,
right. Well, keeping in mind that their guards are Dent and Lewis, But I think the biggest I saw was I think it's Illinois. I think it's the biggest.
Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois' got 6'6", 6'9", 6'7", 6'2", 7'1", 7'2", 6'9", 6'6". That play. So I think that's the difference. Is their guard, St. Mary's guards are smaller.
They think they're the 23-24 Cougs is the thing.
No, was it that year that they were the tallest team in college basketball? Second tallest.
I think they were like one or two. Yeah.
Yeah, they were. The only team taller than them was Florida State, who had was that the year they had the 7'5" dude? No, they just had a bunch of 6'11".
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean that's been a staple of some of David. I mean, David Riley's had some big teams too, but that is a big team. And I think, the average height gets skewed a little bit, but there's not a lot of teams, we'll put it this way, there's not a lot of teams who are running 7'1" plus guys, and not just 7'1" plus guys, 7'1" plus guys that are like actually skilled and mobile. I mean, you see someone's, you got a 7'4" guy out there. All right, but he can't move. He doesn't have a lot of, like, those are good players. Like, those aren't just big oafs. Those are good players with McKeever and Wessels. And it's just hard to have an answer for that, especially because Washington State really only has one true low post center, and Andy Okafor's giving up 5 inches to those guys.
Right, and even Okafor is not really a traditional big in the same sense. Like,
no, he's 6'10", like 6, and actually he's 6'10" now. He was listed at 6'9" last year, so do that what you will. But he's a 6'9" center. And, to some degree, like rebounding and scoring over guys, height does matter to some degree.
Yeah. Well, and that's always been, I think, like a real disadvantage for them, is because they don't really have, I mean, their two starting bigs, quote unquote, are a 6'9" guy and a 6'8" guy in Emily Oahu. And it's like, they're obviously pro to that, and you saw them in the first half against St. Mary's, like when you're able to pull those guys out of the paint to force them to defend on the perimeter, like you could really stretch them out and make them uncomfortable. But the part that you can't really change is that, like, they're going to be able to hit the glass much, much easier. They're going to, if they catch it within, like, a certain distance from the basket, like, that's pretty much it.
Well, I think in the first half, when they went some of those smaller lineups, right? So you don't have Okafor on the floor. You have Galaho kind of playing the 5. And it's the give and take of, okay, you're going to pull McKeever out of the paint. But then the problem is there's just no answer on the other end.
You can't.
And again, Randy Bennett being Randy Bennett, St. Mary's adjusts to that. So suddenly, they're switching off everything. You're not able to pull McKeever out, and then they're just taking advantage of it inside. So I actually liked that idea in theory of you pull McKeever out of the paint, but it's so hard to counter that defensively because, again, I mean, we're talking about Okafor being smaller. Yalaho's giving up 8 inches, 7 inches to a McKeever. You just can't answer that kind of size in pushing a guy out, especially a guy who has some skill. I mean, you really do have to have, either a 7'7" guy or someone akin to, to Graham Ike, where they can double everything. And it's that's a hard thing to do.
We always talk about, I think a lot of fans complain about, like, like, why isn't Riley or coaches in general, like, why don't they make adjustments? Like, you kind of got to adjust. Like, there's only so many adjustments, to be made when you don't have the cards. Like at some point, like you run out of adjustments to make because you just can't match up physically with another team.
Right. It comes down to sometimes you don't have the size or you don't have the athleticism. And I'm not saying, you throw up your hands like, nothing we can do. But there is, at the end of the day, you don't have the personnel to match that kind of height. Now, there's always you can recruit to that, but it's not that simple. It's not easy to get 7-foot guys. And it's really not easy to get 7-foot guys that have a degree of skill. You can get, a guy like Wazoo had Vova Markovetsky for a few years, but he was just a big 7'3" body. He wasn't necessarily a skilled player. Or you get the guy at San Francisco, Gigaberia, who's just big. I mean, he's not particularly skilled. And granted, he has given Wazoo problems because he is big, but they don't, Washington State isn't getting the Victor Wembayamas of the world. They're not getting the 7'2" skilled guys or the Zach Edey. So it's tough when you get into those matchups where you basically have to have to counter someone akin to, Ruben Shingelu, where he's 6'11", but he's built like he's 7'4".
Yeah, I mean, these guys do not grow on trees. I know that's like cliche to say, but it's like to find a guy that fits that bill is tough. But excuse me, I have also said, I'm not even trying to be like, I told you so, but I've also said since I think the beginning of this season that, like, I think their next piece or just kind of archetype of player that I think they would be smart to add via the portal or wherever is a more traditional big. Because as much as Riley, for better or worse, likes to play the 5 outs, pace out, stretchy out kind of game, it's games like this that I think remind you that there is also something to be said for the value of a guy that's just, even if he's not the most skilled player in the world, 6'10", 6'11", built a little bit, can get a read, you know what I mean? Like, that's, I think, what they've lacked the last, honestly, the first 2 total years of his WSU tenure. Just a real bruiser big that can really get you, score around the basket and get rebounds and physical. And I'm not trying to say that, Andy Okafor and Yalaho aren't capable of that, but they just aren't like that archetype of player by nature, which is okay. I'm not saying that it's bad that they're not that.
Right. I mean, it's not Yalaho. It's not Yalaho's game. He's got 89 2-point attempts this year. I mean, that's 13 more than Adria Rodriguez has. Like, he is like Yalaho is essentially, to some degree, a recreation of a Dane Erickstrup type. And even Dane took 132 twos last year. So, and I'm not saying that, that's a bad player. Yalaho's been very good for him, but that's just, he's not a center. He is a stretch four. Yeah. And I think, ND is, again, he's more of a guy you'd have playing the 4. He doesn't have, if you want to be 6'10" and play the 5, you've got to be long as all, and he's not that long. He's a big body, and I do think he's a good low post scorer, but I think he is better suited playing kind of more of a power forward role where you have a too big look. You've got 2 kind of back to the basket type guys, sort of like when Wazoo would play Isaac Jones with either Ruben Chinyelu or Oscar Clough. Now, Isaac Jones obviously was a special talent. I mean, we're not saying you need that level of it. And obviously we're seeing what Chinyelu and Clough are doing. I mean, you think back, my goodness, look at that front court now. Not even getting into some of the other talent on that team, but I think that's how you've got to have Okafor playing the 4 in some situations. Whereas you're basically saying, okay, we want more guys to bang bodies here. Then you have Okafor with a bigger 5. Or, hey, we want one body banger, one pure shooter, and then you have Yalaho or someone like that in. But no, I do agree that I think going with ND as your only true 5 is a very risky way to work because A, he does get in foul trouble, as is natural for guys at that position. And B, he is 6'9", 6'10". He's not 7'1", 7'2".
Yeah, I think it's a classic case of just guys being a little bit miscast. Like it's just a lot to ask of guys of that literal just physical build to play that kind of position. And I also kind of feel like, because we talk a lot about, how like what Andy Okafor is not. He's gotten so much better throughout this season. Yeah. And I think we shouted him out maybe an episode or 2 ago in terms of guys that have gotten or that have improved the most throughout the season. I think that if he, like in an alternate world where he has another, like if he played this much at Cal one of those years, or he just like had another year of experience under his belt, going into last year where he was able to play the 4 more, then I think that team could have been a lot better just because of like the improvements that we've seen that he's shown he's capable of. It was just, he didn't have the experience to really capitalize on being able to play the 4 last season. So that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying that like, guys of that build just sometimes need a little bit more time to develop.
Right.
So anyway, yeah.
And I will say too, just to kind of put a bow on that, it is worth noting that the teams they are about to, I mean, this has been St. Mary's MO for as long as I can remember. They're going to have a lot of Australians, and then they're going to have just some absolute giants in the paint. Whether you're talking about, Jock Landale maybe being the extreme just with his talent, but they have always had big bodies. Jordan Hunter going back a few years, but a lot of the makeups of some of the new Pac-12 teams aren't necessarily that. Gonzaga's Gonzaga, but you kind of look through kind of what their blueprints are this year. It's a lot more of, hey, all these, like Drew Fielder's one of the bigger guys they'll face next year from Boise State, but even he's kind of more of that stretch 4, stretch 5-ish. I mean, he's 6'11", but he's only 225, right? So that's a big guy. Now, I'm not saying it's not, but that's the other thing with Wessels and McKeever, just kind of to wrap the point. They're 7'1", 7'3". They're 280. Like, I mean, they're not 210, twigs. They're big and they're built. They're well put together. And I think that's what also makes it is sometimes you get some of the twigs and you can just push them out of the way. You can't move those guys.
No, they'll be great right tackles if St. Mary's had a football team.
Yeah.
So it's too bad they don't.
And to some degree, they can defend the perimeter.
Yeah. I think a lot of those guys can't move their feet, but they're not, you know, total. They're not, slow out there. But yeah, anyway, man, overall, I think there's some things to criticize them over in this game between, like taking Ace Class out when they would have just gotten to within one, or some of just kind of missed assignments when it came to defending St. Mary's. Like there was one instance in the second half where Parker Garrett goes under a screen on Joshua Dent, who like has burned them 1,000 times.
He's no kid. Joshua Dent is the classic good player who, whether it's he likes seeing the Cougar uniform or because they go under screens, I think he's hit 9 or 10 threes against them this year, and the most he's hit against any other team is like 4. He is the classic good player we're a mixture of whether you want to call a little bit of, sometimes guys just hurt other teams or they don't do a good enough job defending him, turns into Steph when he plays them.
Yeah. So, and there's things like that. Like, I know there was one sequence where Ace Glass misses like a blockout and turns into an offensive rebound, and another 3 for Josh Dent. So things like that. It's just like, you could criticize him over it, but the reality of the situation is like there's no shame in losing to St. Mary's.
No, it's kind of the same. It's the same as like when you lose to Gonzaga, right? It's in that same. But I think what's frustrating, I think, is just kind of the way it happened, where you were in that game and then it just unraveled like just badly. Mm-hmm. Whereas the shame in losing the way they did to Gonzaga is just really not even showing up. Let's call a spade a spade. That was a thorough beatdown from the first, for 36 minutes. I think you felt like you were right there for 27 minutes, and then just seeing the way that that St. Mary's was able to adjust and change what they were doing enough to create that difference, and you just didn't have the response. And that's something we've obviously seen, be a problem over the last couple of years. And I think they're better at it this year than they were last year. Last year they couldn't take any sort of punch. They got punched, they lost. Really, for the most part, they've been better at it this year at home. But as Riley said, sometimes teams throw a second punch, and you have to be prepared for that. And they did not have the chin for the second punch.
Yeah. So, I think coming up this week, we will be looking for them to be able to absorb some of those punches and be able to get up off the mat, which is actually, before we move on from the St. Mary's game, let me just play. I don't know if I'll play it, but I'll just read you a quote from Riley after the game. I asked him, because he was talking about all the like one of the great benefits that St. Mary's has enjoyed this season and over the last several seasons is just their continuity, which is not something that obviously WSU has enjoyed. Over the last 2 off seasons, they've lost their entire starting 5. Obviously, the coaching change is an outlier, but continuity has not been one of the benefits that this team has enjoyed over the last couple seasons. So that's one of the things I asked Riley after the game on Saturday, was just like, how do you build that in this era? How do you run the offense you run in this new era where, it's not unreasonable to expect you have to rebuild your roster every season to some degree here at WSU. And so he just starts talking about, he goes, you look at the conference and the teams that are better winning it, there's a direct correlation with how much, he says it plainly, with how much money you have to pay players and where you finish, in the conference. He says it's very clear that matters. And then he goes on to talk about the retention that St. Mary's has been able to enjoy between, Maggie Lewis, he talked about them, Liam Campbell, Roy Hawk, McKeever, all these guys. I'm sure I'm blanking on a couple, but all these guys have been around the program for at least a year prior. So, talked about having a 5th-year point guard, things like that. So, and lastly on this point, he says that he says, it's easy to say in this day and age that you're going to have to rebuild a roster every year. He goes, there's ways to avoid that. And obviously there is. And I don't know how else to say it, but it just comes down to the money, which is exactly the way he said it himself. Like, right. If you don't have the money to pay guys to even, obviously we talk about it out of the portal all the time, but even just keeping guys here for another year is that plays a huge part in that too. And I don't know, man, we talk about how, just by virtue of being holdovers in the Pac-12 that, the Cougs and Oregon State are going to be like the leaders of the new Pac-12. But obviously there's Gonzaga joining and complicates things. But I don't think it's smart. I don't, as far as the NIL situation goes, I know that's a whole deal and we won't get all into that. But I don't think it's smart to just assume that two of these guys, just by virtue of being holdovers, are going to just be jump to the head of the front of the pack. No pun intended.
Right. I do think the one thing that I'll wonder about, and I think we'll get more evidence as we see it next year, is all of the WCC teams, with the exception, I think, of San Diego and I guess Oregon State, have no football, right? So any NIL dime that we know Gonzaga, but any NIL dime that San Diego gets or Santa Clara gets goes to the basketball team. Whereas, as we know at Washington State, football is what is king. That's where the money goes. So I'll be curious to see how that dynamic plays out when, again, you're joining with all these other teams who also have football. What does that balance things out a little bit, right? Because part of the reason I think St. Mary's is able to have this retention is because when they get NIL money, okay, they give it to Morauskas and they give it to Dent and McKeever and Wessels and Lewis and all these guys. And obviously we know that with Gonzaga. And the same thing with Santa Clara. It's you give it to Mahi and you give it to to bring in Thierry Darlan and and Hammond and all these guys, and you use it to get Alan Graves. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Whereas Wazoo gets NIL money, it goes to retaining Kirby Voorhees and Tony Freeman, and I think to the same degree with Oregon State is actually I think a lot of theirs goes to baseball. I think I'll be very interested to see what the continuity looks like when they're kind of on. I don't want to say they're on an uneven playing field right now, but to some degree, it's again all the resources for those schools go to basketball, whereas that's, as we know, the secondary sport at Washington State. Now, I'm not saying that that makes it okay to lose to San Diego or that makes it okay to lose to Idaho or anything like that. I just think it's an interesting thing to really consider, especially when you're comparing them to kind of the big three in the conference: Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Santa Clara, who A, have established coaches, have established programs, and B, that's where all the money is funneling into.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we could be here until next week talking about NIL at WSU. So let's keep it moving here. So they have two more games in their regular season, which, like I said at the top, are at LMU on Wednesday, and then at Pepperdine next Saturday. Both of which, I mean, they look like winnable games, but I don't think there's anything that this team has showed us throughout the season to give us a strong sense of confidence that they're going to win both of these. But what matters, I mean, if they are able to do that, then they'll have a pretty good shot at earning the number 4 seed, which, like I said, it comes with a good bye in the conference tournament. So just to run down the standings as we record this, right now they are number 6 in the conference at 7-9 overall. So obviously you have Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Santa Clara, 1 through 3. And then that's kind of when things get all jumbled up and crazy. So we have Oregon State at number 4 right now, 8-8. Pacific 8-9 at number 5. WSU 7-9 at number 6. And then San Francisco at number 7, they're 7-10. And then it kind of drops off a little bit from there. So why don't you give us the rundown? Because you explained this to me before we hit record on the way this is going to have to shake out. How can they earn the number 4 seed? Right.
So I do want to preface, I'm 99% sure that this is the scenario. You never really know. But the way I understand it is, if they win both games, they're 9-9.
Yeah.
If Oregon State splits, which I think we probably expect them to do, they play someone bad at home, and then they play Santa Clara on the road. So they got San Diego at home, Santa Clara on the road. Okay, they're probably going to go 1-1. So that would put them at 9-9 as well. That would mean that Wazoo's fate would be tied to the Pacific San Francisco game. Because if San Francisco wins, right, then San Francisco finishes above Pacific. They are both 8-10 in conference. Wazoo and Oregon State are both 9-9. That's when, because Wazoo and Oregon State split, it goes down the list of, okay, who's got the better record against the teams highest in the standing, right? So no one beat the top 3. And then because San Francisco is above Pacific, Oregon State beat San Francisco twice. Wazoo did not. Oregon State gets the 4 seed. If Pacific wins, then Pacific, Wazoo, and Oregon State are all 9-9. So then what happens is it goes into a pool of head-to-head records amongst the 3 teams. So Wazoo's 2-1 against Pacific and Oregon State. Pacific is 2-1 against Wazoo and Oregon State. Oregon State is 1-3 against Wazoo and Pacific. So that eliminates Oregon State and then brings it back to Wazoo Pacific. Wazoo has the tiebreaker because they beat Pacific. Therefore, they're the 4 seed. So,
okay.
And let me simplify it because I know that sounds complex. Win both games, Pacific beats San Francisco, Wazoo's the 4. Win both games, and San Francisco wins, Wazoo's the 5, which isn't the worst thing in the world because then you would face one of the the earlier teams, and then you'd face the 4 seed. Where you don't want to end up is at 6, because then even if you win your first game, you're dancing with one of Santa Clara or Gonzaga St. Mary's. So you want to be on the side where you play the 4 seed. I don't think we're going to kid ourselves into believing that they're going to go and beat one of the big 3 teams in the conference. But I think it would optically.
You have to give yourself the best shot.
Optically, and even for morale. Hey, you can get to Monday, you get to the semifinals. That's not a bad way to finish out what has been an up and down season. So that's, I think, the best way. You've got to end up on the 4 seed or 5 seed line and hope that it falls the way you want it. And then, maybe, who knows, maybe you do something remarkable. Granted, you end up at the 4 seed, your semifinal game, you know who you're playing most likely. And we've seen what's happened twice now.
Should they tank for the 5th seed? Should they try to game it to get the 5th seed?
But even then, the 5th seed is still on the Gonzaga line.
Oh, that's true.
Assuming Gonzaga wins the league, which it is important to note, they do play at St. Mary's this weekend.
Oh, that's true.
But I think even so, I think Gonzaga would have the tiebreaker.
I think
even if they split with St.
they're
Mary's.
They're already a full game up. Right. So if they then they would tie, and then I guess they.
Well, I think it would depend on. Oh no, if Gonzaga loses to St. Mary's and St. Mary's or Santa Clara sweeps this week, then one of those teams. So Gonzaga has to win both, if for no other reason than just to fend off. They're going to beat Portland at home. So it's going to come down to, it probably will come down. In fact, it will come down to that because St. Mary's and Santa Clara play. So one of those teams is going to have 15 wins. So it could very well occur. What Gonzaga probably needs is Santa Clara to win that game. No, not even.
Well,
if you're Gonzaga, you need to win both games. It's going to be a fun Saturday to determine who wins the WCC regular season title.
I do love the fact that, I don't know if this is like an every year thing, but having Gonzaga and St. Mary's be the last game of the regular season has turned into just an incredible spectacle the last couple of years. That's pretty cool.
The only way I think Gonzaga would get away with it with not winning both is if they they lose to St. Mary's, who had lost to Santa Clara, and Santa Clara loses to Oregon State, which isn't going to happen. So it'll probably come down to now. It would be really fun. St. Mary's beats Santa Clara, and it's just Gonzaga St. Mary's for the WCC regular season title. That'd be fun.
Wouldn't that be sick? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Yeah. It'd be dope. Why don't we talk a little bit about? I know there's a lot of crazy situations that we're trying to kind of wrap our heads around, but the Cougars need to win these 2 games to put themselves in the kinds of conversations that we're talking about right now. So,
and I should add too, there is, I believe, one scenario where they could fall all the way down to the 9 seed and have to play on Thursday.
WSU.
Like
if they lose these 2 games.
If they lose these 2 games, that would require San Diego to win out, which probably isn't happening.
Oh, but San Diego has one of their games is
they've got Oregon State and Portland on the road, which not exactly the cream of the crop, but I don't think San Diego is going on the road winning both games without Tyler Johnson. Put it that way.
Yeah.
So as long as that doesn't, and simple solution, just don't lose to Pepperdine at least. Just don't lose to the worst team in the league.
If they lose to Pepperdine, they got bigger problems on their hands.
Right.
Anyway. So,
the seeding is the least of their concerns if they lose to Pepperdine.
Right.
No disrespect to Pepperdine, and they do have one of the hottest players in the league right now in Aaron Clark, but.
Dude, yeah, and I don't know. I mentioned this to you 1,000 times. I don't know if I've ever said it on this podcast. I think the best coaching job in the entire college basketball world is the coaching job at Pepperdine, because no expectations, and any season you get to live in Malibu. Yeah, you know, you kind of just get to cruise through every season, collect your paycheck, and keep going. So I'm very jealous of that.
Quick thing, just before we put a wrap on the 2 games this week. LMU the last 3 games has been without Jalen Shelley, their best player, and Pepperdine was without Danilo Dozic this last week, their best big man. So that is something to monitor, especially LMU not having Shelley. He's their best scorer. He's their best rebounder. He's their best player. He's their highest usage guy. So they don't have him. That suddenly that game takes a positive turn, I think, in Wazoo's favor to have a chance to win.
Yeah, well, he was out there when they had to win the first game against LMU like 3 different times. I remember, like they got up big and they came back and got a bigger lead and then came back again. Then had to stave them off like a 3rd time. So, but that was at home, like we said. So I mean, there's nothing. I don't know if they have any like road performances this season that really give you a compelling sense of confidence they can go out there and just. I'm not saying they can't win the game, but I just like the hallmark of these 2 David Riley teams has been kind of like being a little bit shaky on the road, especially this season. So,
we'll see. Their one road win came at the one place Gonzaga lost. Make that make sense.
honestly, like I know, like we were talking about if Pacific is their best win of the season, which it probably is, but I think like the number 2 candidate in my mind, honestly, it sounds crazy, but coming back to beat Portland on the road in like late December, I think is up there. And I know it's, Portland's whatever, but like
Portland also lost to Pepperdine at home.
No, I know. But I'm saying that like the way that game, we always talk about the way things happen, and like the way that one unfolded was like it would have been very easy for them to fold.
No,
I'm not
100%.
saying like so.
St. Thomas is actually a pretty solid team. I think they'll have a shot to make the tournament out of the Summit League, and hell, Eastern's one of the hottest teams in the nation right now. 6 straight wins. They're going to have a shot to make it out of the Big Sky. And that's not a whole lot of other great.
I mean, I know. Yeah, outside of that, it's like
Seattle U, but Seattle U. Just it depends on what side of the bed they wake up on.
Yeah, they don't like. People were prepared to like call like Seattle like they looked like a really like a real contender at the beginning of conference play, but.
Hey, Mercer, and actually Mercer has a shot to come out of the SoCon as the automatic bid. We'll see where that goes, but
okay.
Anyways,
but yeah, I guess the point is that they don't have it's few and far between on their best wins of the season. So yeah, LMU and then Pepperdine both on the road. I honestly like that's really about it. I mean, they kind of just. I mean, what? Also, I should say, this is kind of like neither here nor there, but it's kind of a couple of notes I wanted to throw out there. We were talking about their 3-point shooting at the top. Do you want to hear some numbers on some of their shooters' numbers? So on the season, Reeve Avers is shooting 41% on threes, which like is remarkable. 47% in conference play.
Yeah,
which is just like, I mean, that's almost impossible. And that's number 4. Actually, it's only number 4 in the conference.
And it's lower than what he shot last year. Granted, much fewer attempts.
I mean, he didn't play as much.
Right. No, but yeah, he's been over the last since he came back from injury, he has been their best player, and that includes Ace.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. That's something to knock on Ace. Ree has just been 9 straight now in double figures. I think it is.
That sounds right. Yeah, I think his last single digit game was like.
St. Mary's on the road.
Early January. Oh,
yeah, he had 9.
So yeah, he's been unreal. He's making everything he looks at, and like that's like, and I think the thing with him is that like last year, or honestly, even earlier this season, if he was not making his threes, it was hard to see what he would give you.
Right, elsewhere. And he didn't start that way. Remember?
Yeah.
I mean, he was 3 of his first 11, 16, 3 of his first 18. And then kind of the game at Chaminade seemed to spark him. And then ever since he's, so you take out, 3 of his first 18. And since then, he's shooting a cool 45% from 3.
And I mean, that is just like, that's an elite mark. It's just like, that is hard to.
I think he's 12th in the league in conference play in scoring. It's like 14 points a game.
That sounds right.
I think Ace is like 5th or 6th. Like, they probably won't finish high enough. But I mean, he should at least, I would think, get some sort of honorable mention for all WCC. I mean, Ace should absolutely be there. Granted, Lawan should have been there last year and wasn't, so who knows?
We've entered Jamey's postseason awards curmudgeon phase.
My big curiosity will be, is Ace the freshman of the year, or is it Foxwell?
Yeah.
It should be Ace if you're going off team success, but Foxwell isn't.
Yeah, I mean, Foxwell has a win over Gonzaga, which the team is not going to finish as well as WCU, but
it also going to be. I mean, Alan Graves is one of the better players on a great Santa Clara team. I don't think he has the counting numbers, but Ken Pom has him as the 3rd most valuable player in the conference this year.
Damn.
Nice. So,
we'll see. Yeah. A couple other guys that I just wanted to mention in terms of their shooting. I don't know how this applies to what we were talking about, but like Emily Yalaho, 41% on 3 on the year. Another guy that, like, I know you give me a hard time all the time about being so wrong about Jamey Wells at the beginning of that season, but honestly, like Yalaho, like I was not really sure, just being so unfamiliar with a new guy like that. I was like, well, at the beginning of the year, I was like, well, is he like a reliable shooter? I'm not so sure, but like, I mean, my God, man, I mean, the results speak for themselves.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first
really.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say, I just like the form is great catch and shoot guy, knows his limits in terms of the best shots he can take, and just knocking them down.
Yeah, I think those first 3 games were like, oh boy, like this is a little rough. Yeah. But I think we've also, in fairness, seen he is a very streaky player. I mean, he has, he's got the games where he has 26, 21, and then he has games where it's like, oh boy, the turnovers are a little high, or he's missing his shot. I mean, the Gonzaga game, I mean, no one played well, but his threes were all over the place in that game. But before that, he had 21 against Santa Clara. He's had 26 against Portland. So you can tell he's still kind of raw in that. Very talented, but there's still like some games where it's like, man, he's not giving you much, and then other games where, wow, he's the best player on the floor.
Yeah, I just think it's like you could tell that he's playing a role that he has not played before.
Right.
And I think playing minutes he hasn't played before.
The one thing, if they can bring him back, that they'll want to correct is that 24% turnover rate in WCC play. That's just a little bit too high.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Especially because I feel like a lot of them come from just getting it knocked out of his hands or dribbling off his foot and so on.
Yeah, I think he has a tendency for some bad passes every now and then, too. They end up getting picked off or tipped or whatever. But those are all things you can turn around.
Right.
And then the last guy that we talked about Jordan Morton just kind of being able to bail them out. I mean, he had the 2 threes against Pacific to kind of spark their turnaround in that game. But this is crazy. 47% from 3 in conference play.
Yeah, but you feel like it's all coming like 3 games.
He's not a guy. He's not like a guy that, like, I think he's more of an off the dribble player anyway. So you're almost a little bit surprised to see a number that high.
And it's because he doesn't hit a ton of them, right? It's like, you look at his numbers, it's 2 for 2, 2 for 3, 2 for. He's just not a volume shooter in that way. Because like he got really hot for that stretch, LMU, Oregon State, Gonzaga, San Francisco, and then he went ice cold. He was like 1 for 11 for a stretch, and now he's gotten hot again. So you definitely, I think he's another one of those guys who there's some streakiness to him, but he just isn't he's not a volume shooter. Where 49 attempts in 16 games, so that's about a little over 3 a game.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of in conference play, and overall, I mean, 72 attempts in 28 games, so like 2.5 per game. I just think it doesn't feel like he has shot that well. I just think because he hasn't shot that many.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's honestly about all we had for this one. I guess a couple last developments to touch on is that when they play LMU and Pepperdine this time around, they will have Tomas Thrasherson back, which they did not have the first time they played both of those teams. So something to keep in mind. They'll have a much hotter Reeve Avers for that one. I don't know if it's fair to say probably not Emmanuel Ugbo, who has now served 6 games of a suspension.
Well, we talked to Riley in about 30 minutes, so maybe we'll.
Yeah, so maybe we can just throw some note on the screen around this time to update that situation. But anyway, but yeah, last 2 games of the regular season coming up for them, and then that will determine what seed they got for the conference tournament, which is at least starts for the first teams on March 5th in Las Vegas. So we will both be there, as I understand it, and we will get back to it next week with a better picture on what that looks like for them. So
exactly.
So yeah, all right. Well, I think that'll do it for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. And Jamey, I will talk to you next week.